Changes are coming to the Jaguars offense, and no, Minshew Mania fans, judging by the photo in the screen, they have not traded Nick Foles, but they have parted ways with Foles' guy. The Jaguars announced today they have, quote, mutually agreed to part ways with offensive coordinator John DeFilippo, Foles' former quarterbacks coach in Philadelphia. DeFilippo, or Flip, lasted just 1 year in Duval County, which means the Jaguars will be hiring their fifth offensive coordinator since 2013. A rundown now of some of the statistical rankings during the DeFilippo era. To the casual observer, the offense looked a lot more functional than the Blake Bortles era. But the Jags actually saw a significant drop in third down efficiency and remained inefficient in the red zone. So who might finally be the guy to cure the Jaguars' offensive ills? One name that immediately began making the rounds after this morning's announcement, former Cowboys head coach Jason Garrett. Not only did he previously serve as Cowboys OC, but Jags owner Shad Khan maintains a friendship with Cowboys owner Jerry Jones, who took his sweet time firing his good friend Garrett this offseason. Another former head coach who could be on the Jags shortlist, Jim Caldwell. In between stints as a head coach, he orchestrated Joe Flacco and the 2013 Ravens run to the Super Bowl. And if Khan decides to, fire Marrone midway through 2020, a proven head coach could easily step in as the interim. This last guy does not have head coaching experience, but he does have Jaguar ties. Todd Monken reportedly interviewed for the Jaguars offensive coordinator position a year ago. Instead, he ended up in Cleveland. The Browns have a new head coach. One would think that puts Monken back on the market. Do the Jags get a do-over? Well, I do know some guys who really want a do-over.